It was supposed to be the best night of her life, the kind of night that marked the end of one chapter and the beginning of everything she'd ever dreamed of. But when the sun rose over the sleepy town of Ashwood, North Carolina, Hannah McCall was gone, vanished without a sound, without a trace. Friends would later say she was glowing that night, laughing, dancing, talking about her future. Her phone held photos full of light, but hidden in the pixels was the shadow of something no one could see coming. Because while everyone celebrated their freedom, someone out there had been waiting, watching. Hannah had always been the kind of girl who noticed things others didn't. A small-town journalist with an instinct for truth, and a stubborn streak that could outlast any warning. She'd spent the last year chasing small stories for her university paper, safety tips, student profiles, graduation dreams, but what she was really drawn to were mysteries, stories that lingered after the cameras left. And there was one story, in particular, that had consumed her in secret. A string of missing women from rural counties, all young, all blonde, all gone. On June 5th, the night of her graduation, Hannah promised herself she'd stop thinking about it. She was done with darkness for one night, at least. The evening began with joy, music spilling out from open car windows, friends clinking glasses, and the sound of summer humming in the air. Her fiancé, Ethan Ward, had surprised her with a simple silver bracelet engraved with the words, "For every tomorrow." She smiled, kissed him, and told him she'd be home by midnight. But Hannah never made it home. At 12:07 a.m., she was seen on surveillance footage, leaving the Dockhouse bar alone. Her friends assumed she'd just needed air, or maybe she'd gone to grab her car before the crowd spilled out. At 12:15, a traffic camera caught her car driving down the old county road, headlights cutting through the fog like a ghost slipping into the dark. After that, nothing. The next morning, when Hannah didn't answer her mother's call, it felt strange, but not alarming. By noon, unease began to set in. By nightfall, the unease turned to panic. Her car was found on the side of the road, just 5 miles from home. Door slightly ajar, keys still in the ignition. Inside, her purse was gone. Her phone was later found in the grass 10 feet away, screen cracked, battery dead. Detective Raymond Cole was assigned the case that same evening. A 30-year veteran of the force, he'd seen everything, or thought he had. But the scene bothered him, the absence of chaos. "No struggle," he said quietly, looking over the empty road. "It's like she just stopped existing." The search began immediately. Volunteers combed through fields. Drones scanned the woods. Dogs picked up traces that faded near the lake. Ethan showed up every morning, his hands trembling as he unfolded flyers, taping Hannah's smiling face to every lamppost. Her photo, long blonde hair, bright blue eyes, white graduation dress became a haunting emblem of hope. Then came the whispers. Someone had seen a dark pickup truck parked behind the bar that night. Another said a man had been watching Hannah for weeks, sitting alone at the diner near campus. Each story added fuel to the growing fire, but none could be confirmed. When the media arrived, they painted Hannah as the perfect all-American girl, hard-working, kind, ambitious. But the more the cameras lingered, the more cracks began to appear. Reporters dug into her social media and discovered private posts hinting at anxiety, sleepless nights, and the feeling that she was being followed. One caption read, "Sometimes, I think someone knows where I'm going before I do." Detective Cole decided to look deeper. He pulled her laptop from her apartment, and that's where the first real clue surfaced. Buried in her email drafts was a folder labeled Research Confidential. Inside were articles, police reports, and photographs of 5 missing women, each from towns within 50 miles of Ashwood. Each disappearance unsolved. Each woman a mirror of Hannah herself. Cole's gut tightened. She wasn't just a victim, he muttered to his partner. She was investigating something. The deeper they went, the darker it became. Hannah had been exchanging emails with someone named Nate. At first glance, the messages looked professional, questions about law enforcement records and missing person patterns. But as the conversation went on, the tone shifted. Nate wrote like someone who knew too much. He mentioned things that were never made public, things only someone on the inside could have known. One message, dated 2 days before she vanished, read, "You're getting close, Hannah, but be careful who you trust." Detective Cole traced the email account, but it led nowhere. A dead domain, masked IPs. Whoever Nate was, he didn't want to be found. Meanwhile, Ethan's interviews began to draw suspicion. He wept on camera, pleaded for Hannah's return, but detectives noticed inconsistencies. He said she left the bar with her friends, but footage showed her alone. He claimed she was happy that week, but her roommate said otherwise. When asked about her secret research, he grew defensive. "She told me nothing about that," he said, eyes darting. It was enough to keep him in the spotlight of suspicion. Days turned into weeks. Ashwood changed. The town that once felt safe now watched itself in the mirror with fear. Women stopped going out at night. Doors were locked before sunset. The sound of a pickup engine made hearts jump. Then, on the 22nd day of the search, a local fisherman made a chilling discovery. Near the lake where Hannah had celebrated her graduation, he found a graduation tassel, tangled in the reeds, gold and white, embroidered with 2024. Tests confirmed it was Hannah's, and just like that, the hope that she'd simply run away vanished completely. Detective Cole gathered the evidence in silence. He stared out over the lake as mist rolled in, the water swallowing reflections of the searchlights. "She knew something," he whispered. "She found something, and someone made sure she never shared it." That night, Cole sat alone in his office, reading Hannah's final notes. One line, scrawled in her journal, sent a chill through him. Truth isn't always hidden in darkness. Sometimes it hides behind a badge. The detective looked up, his face hardening. A theory began to form, one that would change everything about the investigation, the town, and the legacy of Hannah McCall. And as he closed the file, one thing became terrifyingly clear. The monster Hannah had been chasing might have been closer than anyone ever imagined. The morning after Hannah's disappearance, the small town of Bellevue changed forever. The once silent streets echoed with sirens, and yellow tape cut through the cool air like a scar. Hannah's name was on every tongue, whispered in grocery lines, murmured in church pews, and shouted by news reporters crowding the narrow sidewalks. Her mother, Laura, sat on the porch in the same flannel robe she'd worn the night before, staring blankly at the driveway where her daughter's car should have been. Detective Erin Vaughan arrived at 7:15 a.m. sharp. She had been with the Bellevue Police Department for over 15 years, tough, methodical, and known for her intuition. She'd worked robberies, assaults, and the occasional homicide, but this felt different. This wasn't just another case. This was the kind that lingers in the air, heavy and wrong. Hannah's bedroom became the epicenter of the investigation. Erin walked in carefully, scanning every surface. The bed was made. The phone charger was still plugged in. The desk light glowed softly. It had been left on all night. On the corkboard above the desk, neatly pinned photos told the story of a life interrupted. Hannah with her college friends. Hannah at the lake with her boyfriend Evan. Hannah with her mother holding a small rescue dog she'd adopted. Everything looked normal to normal. Erin crouched by the vanity. A single pearl earring lay on the floor. Its twin sat untouched in a small dish. That kind of detail mattered. Hannah wasn't the type to rush. Her mother confirmed it. She never left the house without checking her earrings twice. Outside, officers canvassed the neighborhood. One neighbor, an elderly man named Dale Higgins, recalled seeing a dark SUV idling near the McCall home around 11:30 p.m. "Didn't think much of it," he said, "figured it was one of them delivery fellas." But Hannah's last text message, recovered from her phone records, had been sent at 11:42 p.m. to her best friend, Megan. "He's here. Wish me luck." Who was he? Evan, her boyfriend, claimed he hadn't seen her since the afternoon. They'd argued, nothing major, he said, just about her decision to move to Atlanta for a new job. He told detectives she'd driven home around 8:30 p.m., upset but safe. His alibi: he was at his cousin's apartment playing video games. Erin noted the hesitation in his voice when he said it. By noon, the search expanded. Dozens of volunteers joined police combing through nearby woods and trails. A local news crew followed closely, capturing every tearful plea from Laura McCall. On live television, she said through trembling lips, "Hannah, if you can hear me, we love you. Just come home." The footage went viral. The case exploded across social media. #FindHannahMcCall trended nationwide. Tips poured in hundreds within the first 24 hours. Most were dead ends, but one stood out. A call came from a gas station clerk 20 miles away. He remembered a girl matching Hannah's description, same denim jacket, same hair, accompanied by a man around midnight. The security footage confirmed it. Hannah appeared uneasy. glancing toward the exit twice. The man beside her wore a black baseball cap pulled low, obscuring his face. He paid for gas in cash, then led her back to the SUV. When Erin replayed the footage frame by frame, she noticed something chilling, a reflection in the window, a small sticker on the SUV's rear bumper, the faded logo of a construction company based 3 towns over. By evening, police tracked down the company owner. He recognized the vehicle. It belonged to a former employee, Kyle Benson. Benson was 28, had a minor record for assault, and had recently been let go after a string of angry outbursts. He'd also done work near the McCall home 2 months earlier. Laura vaguely remembered him, said he'd creeped her out once by asking too many personal questions about Hannah. A warrant went out. Benson's trailer was empty. His phone was off. His neighbors said he'd packed up 2 days before Hannah vanished. The tension in town grew unbearable. Reporters compared it to the early days of the Gabby Petito case. Everyone had theories. Some blamed Evan, some the mother. Others thought Hannah had run away. But Erin refused to speculate. She trusted evidence, not gossip. On the 3rd day, a break came from an unexpected place. A hiker found Hannah's denim jacket near the edge of a dried creek bed, 15 miles north. It was muddy, torn at the sleeve, and inside one pocket was a folded note smeared with dirt. The handwriting matched Hannah's, frantic but clear. "If you find this, please tell my mom I tried." The note hit Erin like a punch to the chest. This wasn't a simple abduction. It was something deeper, a struggle, a chase, maybe even a betrayal. Forensics confirmed Benson's fingerprints on the jacket. Within hours, the FBI joined the case. A regional manhunt began, with helicopters scanning abandoned quarries, gas stations, and forest roads. But Hannah was still nowhere. As Erin studied the timeline that night, something gnawed at her. Benson had been missing for days, long before the gas station sighting. So who was the man with Hannah on the footage? If it wasn't Benson, then someone else was using his vehicle. She returned to the video, zooming in on Hannah's reflection. Beneath the fluorescent light, her expression wasn't just fear, it was recognition. She knew the man beside her. At 2:17 a.m., a call came through from the lab. The partial license plate from the footage matched one recently logged by a highway camera outside Bellevue, time-stamped just minutes before midnight. The driver, registered to Evan Ross, Hannah's boyfriend. Erin's pulse quickened. Evan's cousin confirmed he'd left the apartment that night for about an hour, around the same time Hannah vanished. When questioned again, Evan broke. His voice trembled as he said, "I just wanted to talk. She wasn't answering my calls." He admitted meeting her that night, following her home, and convincing her to go for a drive to clear things up. He insisted he dropped her off safely at the gas station around midnight, but the footage suggested otherwise. When police searched Evan's car, they found faint traces of blood on the passenger seat. The lab later matched it to Hannah's DNA. The story tore through the media. Boyfriend linked to Hannah McCall's disappearance. Protesters gathered outside his house. Evan's lawyer claimed the evidence was circumstantial, but Erin knew better. The pattern was clear: the manipulation, the jealousy, the control. A week after Hannah's disappearance, a storm hit Bellevue. Power lines fell. Roads flooded. During the chaos, a local farmer called in a report, a vehicle abandoned near his field, half submerged in mud. It was the black SUV. Inside were traces of blood, Hannah's phone, and a crumpled photo of her with Evan. On the back, written in marker, were 3 words: "You made me." That night, Erin sat in her car outside the McCall home, rain streaking across the windshield. She replayed the details over and over. Something still didn't add up. Evan's story had holes, yes, but the timing of Benson's disappearance, the planted note, and the strange writing on the photo, it all pointed to something orchestrated. Someone wanted Evan to look guilty. When the rain eased, Erin received a message from the FBI field team. "We've located Benson. He'd been spotted at a rest stop 200 miles away, driving a stolen pickup truck. As units closed in, Benson fled into the woods. After a tense standoff, he was taken into custody. He looked exhausted, hollow-eyed, almost relieved. When asked about Hannah, his answer froze everyone in the room. "I didn't take her," he said quietly. "She came to me." Erin stared at him. "What do you mean she came to you?" Benson's cracked lips trembled. "She said she was scared that someone was watching her, someone she thought she loved." The words hit like thunder. If Benson was telling the truth, then the story wasn't over, not even close. Somewhere between guilt, obsession, and fear, the truth about Hannah McCall was still waiting to be unearthed. And Erin Vaughan was about to learn that nothing in Bellevue was as simple as it seemed. The interrogation room smelled faintly of rain and disinfectant. Kyle Benson sat across from Detective Erin Vaughan, his wrists cuffed, his eyes sunken and restless. The flickering overhead light painted his face in sharp shadows. For hours, he'd repeated the same story. Hannah came to him, terrified, asking for help. But every time Erin pressed for details, he clammed up. Finally, she slid a photograph across the table, the one found in the SUV. The words, "You made me," scrawled across the back. "Whose handwriting is that, Kyle?" she asked quietly. He stared at it for a long time before whispering, "Hers." Erin didn't move. "Hannah wrote this." Benson nodded slowly. "She said he ruined her life. Said he was going to make her disappear." Outside, agents cross-checked his statement against the evidence. Benson's alibi placed him miles away at the time Hannah vanished. Security footage from a motel confirmed it. He wasn't the man in the SUV, but his phone records showed a missed call from Hannah just minutes before midnight. The picture grew stranger by the hour. While investigators scoured Benson's trailer, they discovered an old voice recorder. On it, a 4-minute clip, muffled voices, a woman crying, and Hannah's unmistakable voice whispering, "He won't let me leave. Please, if anything happens," before the recording cut out with a slam of a car door. The timestamp matched the night she vanished. Evan Ross was rearrested. He maintained his innocence, but could no longer keep the cracks from showing. His story changed. First, he said he only followed her home. Then that she got into someone else's car. But the blood, the phone, the note, the recording, it all closed in. Still, Erin hesitated. There were inconsistencies. The blood on the passenger seat had been too little for a violent assault, and the way the note was written, panicked but deliberate, didn't match someone under immediate threat. 2 weeks into the case, a hiker found a shallow cave 30 miles north, near the Ozark Ridge. Inside were remnants of a campfire, a blanket, and a locket containing a picture of Laura and Hannah, but no body. When Erin arrived, she noticed something else, a spiral notebook wrapped in plastic. Inside were pages written in Hannah's hand. Each page told fragments of her fear, Evan's possessiveness, the growing arguments, the sense she was being followed. The last entry was dated the night she disappeared. It read, "He said, if I don't stay, he'll ruin me. If I run, he'll find me. I'm leaving tonight. If you're reading this, maybe I made it." Tears welled in Erin's eyes as she turned the final page, blank except for one faint fingerprint in mud. It was Hannah's. Search teams swept the surrounding woods. On the third day, a cadaver dog alerted near a ravine. There, beneath layers of fallen leaves, they found her wrapped in her torn jacket, her body partially concealed by a collapsed tree limb. The autopsy confirmed she'd died from blunt force trauma to the head. Time of death, within 2 hours of her disappearance. Her fingernails contained traces of Evan's skin cells. When confronted with the evidence, Evan broke down. In a trembling voice, he confessed he'd followed her that night, begging her not to move away. She'd tried to leave the car. He grabbed her arm. She fought back, and in a moment of rage, he struck her with the flashlight from his glove box. He claimed it was an accident. After realizing what he'd done, he panicked, drove to the woods, carried her body down the ravine, and tried to make it look like she'd been taken by someone else. He planted the jacket and note to frame Benson. When the confession ended, Erin sat in silence. The sound of the rain against the windows filled the room, steady, relentless, like the pulse of the town itself. In the weeks that followed, Bellevue tried to heal. Vigils were held. Murals appeared downtown, painted by locals who'd never even met Hannah. Her mother started a foundation for victims of relationship violence, speaking softly but firmly into microphones. Evil docenti always look like a stranger in the dark. Sometimes it looks like the person who swears they love you. Evan Ross was sentenced to life in prison without parole. During the trial, he never once looked at Laura McCall. His only words before sentencing were, "I just wanted her to stay." But one mystery remained. When evidence technicians reviewed Hannah's phone, they discovered an unsent draft message from the night she vanished, a message that could have changed everything. It read, "Mom, I'm scared. He's outside. If I don't make it, tell Detective Vaughn he isn't who you think." Beneath the message was a saved contact, Erin V. Erin froze when she saw it. She hadn't known Hannah personally, yet Hannah had somehow known her name. Then she remembered. A few months earlier, she'd given a lecture at Hannah's college about women's safety. Afterward, a quiet girl had waited until everyone left, then asked softly, "How do you know when to trust someone who says they love you?" It had been Hannah. Erin stood for a long time in her office that night, staring at the evidence board now stripped of its photos and notes. In their place hung only one thing, Hannah's last message, printed and framed. She whispered, "You did make it, Hannah. You told your story." The case file was officially closed, but the echoes of it lingered. In every small town where a girl walked home late at night, in every mother who watched the clock and prayed for headlights to appear in the driveway, Bellevue moved on, but it never truly forgot. Every year on September 14th, candles flickered along Main Street, hundreds of tiny flames chasing away the darkness for one night. Detective Erin Vaughan attended quietly, standing at the back, listening to the choir's soft hymns. As she turned to leave, a little girl tugged on her sleeve and handed her a folded note. In crayon it said, "Thank you for finding her." Erin smiled faintly, her throat tight. For the first time in months, she looked up at the night sky and felt the weight lift, just a little. The stars above Bellevue shone brighter than they had in a long time, and somewhere, in the soft wind that rustled through the trees, it almost felt like Hannah was finally home. When police arrived at the deserted parking lot of Bowling World in Fort Smith, Arkansas, on a cold December night in 1994, they found a single high heel lying in the gravel, a set of keys half buried in the dirt, and a faint drag mark leading away from where a car once stood. The owner of those belongings, a 19-year-old college student named Melissa Witt, was nowhere to be found. Her car was locked, her purse missing, and her watch had stopped at 7:13 p.m. The last minute she was ever seen alive. Melissa was known in the small community as the kind of girl everyone liked. Bright, ambitious, and always smiling. She was majoring in dental hygiene at West Ark Community College. Friends described her as gentle, organized, and deeply loyal. Her mother, Mary Ann Witt, said she could never stay mad for more than a minute. That December, Melissa had been preparing for finals, looking forward to the Christmas break and planning to spend more time with her mum after months of busy classes. But everything changed on the night of December 1st, 1994. Melissa had finished classes earlier in the afternoon and gone home to change. Around 6:30 p.m., she told her roommate she was heading to Bowling World to meet her mother for a few games. Mary Ann was already at the alley, waiting, but Melissa never arrived. At first, her mother assumed she was running late. It wasn't unusual for Melissa to get caught in traffic or stop for coffee on her way. But as the minutes turned to hours, the easy laughter inside Bowling World began to fade. By 8 p.m., Mary Ann walked to the parking lot, scanning for her daughter's familiar Honda Civic. When she didn't find it, she drove home expecting to see Melissa there. The house was dark. Her daughter's bed was untouched. That's when panic set in. Mary Ann called friends, then the police. Within an hour, Fort Smith detectives were on the scene at Bowling World. The security camera at the front door, outdated and grainy, showed nothing helpful. But near the back of the lot, behind a row of parked trucks, an officer's flashlight caught something glinting in the gravel. Melissa's keys, scattered nearby, her hair clip, one shoe, and faint marks that looked like a struggle. Investigators could tell something had happened fast. There were no signs of robbery, no witnesses, no screams reported. It was as if Melissa had been swallowed by the night. The next morning, the story made the local papers. College student missing mother pleads for help. Volunteers gathered at the parking lot to help search the surrounding woods. Helicopters scanned the area. K-29 units followed a scent that led briefly toward the wooded ridge behind Bowling World, then abruptly vanished. Search teams combed creeks and trails for days. Nothing. It was as if she had been erased. Detectives began piecing together her last known hours. Melissa had stopped earlier that day at a local gas station. The clerk remembered her smiling. Around 6:45 p.m., a witness recalled seeing a girl matching her description near her car, speaking with a man in a brown pickup truck. No one caught the license plate. The man was described as mid-30s, tall with a beard and baseball cap. Police released a composite sketch, but tips quickly fizzled out. By the second week, investigators faced the brutal silence that comes when leads dry up. Mary Ann refused to give up. She printed flyers, contacted television stations, and even organized candlelight vigils. The case began to draw attention beyond Fort Smith. Regional media picked it up. Yet still, no trace of Melissa. No ransom call, no body, no clue. Then came the discovery that reignited hope and fear. 2 weeks after the disappearance, a hiker found a small gold bracelet near a remote logging road in Franklin County, about 30 miles from Bowling World. It matched one Melissa often wore. Detectives rushed to the scene and began a detailed search of the area. Deep in the brush, they found a few strands of hair tangled in branches and signs of a vehicle having recently stopped there. It was anti-proof, but it was enough to suggest Melissa had been taken far from where she vanished. Behind the scenes, the investigation began to turn toward a disturbing possibility that Melissa's disappearance might be connected to another unsolved case, one from earlier that same year. A young woman named Melissa Missy McDaniel had disappeared under eerily similar circumstances. Same age, same build, same region. Her body had later been found in a rural area, showing signs of restraint. Detectives began to wonder, could they be dealing with a serial predator? The Fort Smith police teamed up with state investigators, forming a joint task force. They pored over files, compared crime scenes, interviewed past suspects. One name surfaced again and again, a man named Larry Swearingen, a transient mechanic with a history of violent behavior. He had been seen around Fort Smith during that period, and was later convicted in Texas for the murder of another young woman. But when questioned about Melissa Witt, he denied everything. There was no DNA, no eyewitness, nothing concrete. Months turned into a year. Mary Ann, still haunted by her daughter's last day, kept pushing for answers. She appeared on regional television, begging anyone with information to come forward. Investigators never closed the case, but it grew colder with each passing season. And then, in January 1995, a hunter walking near Turner Bend, about 50 miles from where Melissa disappeared, stumbled upon what appeared to be a shallow grave covered by brush and leaves. Police were called immediately. Inside that clearing, beneath a blanket of dirt and moss, lay the remains of a young woman. Dental records confirmed what everyone feared. It was Melissa Witt. The cause of death was blunt force trauma to the head. Her clothing had been removed, and her jewelry, including that stopped watch, lay in the dirt beside her. The watch had frozen in time at 7:13 p.m., forever marking the moment her life ended. Detectives now had a body, but still, no suspect. The question that haunted everyone remained: who killed Melissa Witt, and why? And as the autopsy revealed new, unsettling clues about the killer's behavior, investigators would uncover a disturbing pattern, one that stretched far beyond Fort Smith and into the dark corners of rural America, where more young women had vanished under nearly identical circumstances. It was only the beginning of a mystery that would come to define one of Arkansas's most haunting unsolved cases, and lead detectives down a chilling trail of obsession, deceit, and hidden lives. When investigators reopened Melissa Witt's file, they weren't just sifting through paperwork, they were reopening a wound that never healed. Detective Clay Reynolds sat in the dim light of his office, staring at the faded Polaroid of a smiling young woman whose eyes seemed to follow him wherever he went. The case file was marked in red, unsolved. For years, that word haunted this small Arkansas town. Melissa had been gone for nearly 6 weeks, yet the trail was far from cold. Every rumor, every whispered name, every anonymous letter that arrived at the station reminded them that the story was finished, that somewhere out there, someone still knew what happened. One cold January morning, a new piece of evidence came through, a photograph mailed anonymously to the local paper. It showed a young woman resembling Melissa, sitting in the passenger seat of a truck, her expression blank, her hands folded tightly on her lap. The note beneath it read, "Look closer. You missed him the first time." Detective Reynolds immediately recognized the license plate partially visible in the image. It belonged to a man they had once interviewed, Gary Tinsley, a local mechanic with a reputation that made most women uneasy. Gary had been questioned in the early days after Melissa's disappearance, but with no physical evidence tying him to her, the case moved on. Now, his name was back in bold. The detectives visited Gary's workshop under the pretense of routine questioning. He greeted them with a forced smile, grease staining his hands. The sound of metal grinding filled the air. "I already told you folks, everything I know," he said, but his eyes betrayed something else, a flicker of fear. When asked about the photograph, Gary hesitated for a second too long. Never seen her since that night, he finally muttered. That night. The phrase caught Reynolds' ear immediately. You mean the night she disappeared? He asked. Gary froze. The detective leaned in, watching the sweat form at his temple. No, Gary stammered. I meant sometime before that. But his story began to unravel. Reynolds obtained a warrant to search Gary's property. Deep inside a storage shed behind the workshop, they found a small metal box. Inside were women's watches, 6 of them. One stood out. Its strap was torn, and the back was engraved with a faint M.W. Melissa Witt. The watch's hands were frozen at 9:37 p.m. The discovery hit like a gut punch. This was the first physical link connecting anyone to Melissa since she vanished. Forensic teams rushed in, documenting everything, while word spread through the town like wildfire. Reporters gathered outside the police station. People whispered that justice was finally coming, but Detective Reynolds knew better. He'd seen too many false endings. The next few days blurred into chaos. The watches were sent to the lab for DNA testing, while a team interviewed Gary's former co-workers and friends. A chilling pattern began to emerge. Several women from neighboring towns had gone missing over the past few years, each one last seen near gas stations, rest stops, or late-night diners, places Gary often visited for side jobs. One of the missing women, identified as Karen Doyle, had disappeared under nearly identical circumstances. Her mother had described her daughter's silver watch, a gift she never took off. Among the watches in Gary's box was one that matched the description exactly. Still, something didn't sit right. If Gary was the killer, why send the photograph to the newspaper? Serial offenders crave control, not exposure. Someone was either trying to frame him or warn them. Late one night, Reynolds sat alone in his car, parked outside Gary's property. He watched as Gary turned off the lights and disappeared inside. The detective couldn't shake the feeling that he was missing something. The phone on his seat buzzed. The forensic report had arrived. The results were shocking. The watch engraved M.W. contained 2 distinct DNA samples. One belonged to Melissa, but the other didn't match Gary. It was from a female. 1,000 questions exploded at once. Who was the second person? A friend, an accomplice, or another victim? Reynolds returned to the evidence board, pinning a new photograph next to Melissa's Karen Doyle to watchers. 2 missing women, 2 sets of DNA. But the connection between them wasn't Gary, it was something else. Digging deeper, the detectives discovered that Melissa and Karen had both volunteered at the same youth charity event the summer before they vanished. There, they worked closely with a woman named Patricia Lawn, the event coordinator. Patricia was respected, calm, and known for helping troubled teens, but something in her file caught the detective's eye. In 1991, Patricia's younger sister had gone missing under mysterious circumstances. The case was never solved. Reynolds arranged a quiet visit. Patricia welcomed them into her home, smiling politely as she poured coffee. Her house was immaculate, yet oddly sterile. No family photos, no clutter, no warmth. When Reynolds mentioned Melissa's name, Patricia's hands trembled just slightly. Such a tragedy, she said. I hope you find whoever did it. The detective watched her carefully. Her eyes never met his. After they left, Reynolds told his partner, she's hiding something. A few nights later, an officer patrolling near Lake Fort Smith spotted a woman's figure near the waterline just before midnight. When the officer approached, the woman vanished into the woods. Footprints led to a small cabin, registered to Patricia Lawn. Inside, investigators found something that froze the blood in their veins. Pinned to the wall were newspaper clippings of every missing woman from the case file, including Melissa Witt. Underneath each article, Patricia had written in neat handwriting. They deserved to be remembered. But one article stood out. Melissa's. The handwriting was different. Angry, jagged. It read, "She knew too much." The discovery shattered the investigation wide open. DNA testing later revealed that the second sample from Melissa's watch matched Patricia Lawn. When confronted, Patricia confessed to meeting Melissa the night she vanished. She claimed Melissa had come to her for help, saying she was being followed. Patricia insisted she'd tried to protect her, but the details didn't line up. She panicked. Patricia said quietly, "She ran out into the dark. I never saw her again." Reynolds didn't believe her. The evidence pointed to something far darker, but without a body, they had nothing solid. Gary remained in custody, denying any involvement beyond bad decisions. Patricia walked free. but the town began whispering her name like a curse. Weeks later, another anonymous letter arrived at the police station. This time, there was no photo, just a single line written in black ink. The one who buried her still wears her smile. The message chilled everyone who read it. Who was being referred to? Patricia, or someone else entirely? The handwriting didn't match any previous samples. Detective Reynolds stared at the letter for a long time. The ink had smudged at the edge, as if someone had written it with trembling hands. Somewhere, the truth was still out there, buried beneath lies, grief, and time. He closed the file slowly and whispered to himself, "She's still trying to tell us something." Outside, the winter wind howled through the trees. The night felt alive, like it was breathing, waiting, watching. And in that silence, the detective swore he heard the faint ticking of a broken watch, echoing from the shadows. Winter turned to spring, but the shadow of Melissa Witt's disappearance still hung over Fort Smith. Detective Clay Reynolds couldn't let it go. Every night, he returned to the corkboard filled with photographs and maps, red string connecting names and places like a spiderweb of grief. The latest anonymous letter, the one who buried her still wears her smile, had fractured everything he thought he knew. He started again from the beginning. Melissa's last known location, the watch, Gary Tinsley, Patricia Lorne. Each thread pointed in a different direction, but there was one pattern that connected them all: control. Every person who came into Melissa's orbit wanted to control her story. Reynolds drove to Lake Fort Smith before dawn. Mist rolled over the still water, and for a moment it felt as though Melissa's presence lingered in the quiet. He thought about her mother, how she had begged him, "Don't let her become another file. Detective, make sure people remember her as she was." The detective's radio crackled. A park ranger's voice came through. "Detective Reynolds, you need to get down to Old Pine Road. We found something." He sped there immediately. The area was cordoned off with yellow tape. Deep in the woods, a sinkhole had opened after a week of heavy rain. Inside it, half buried in the mud, was a piece of human clothing, a maroon sweatshirt, matching what Melissa had been wearing the night she vanished. Nearby, search dogs alerted on a shallow grave. When the forensic team carefully unearthed the remains, silence fell. The watch was still there, rusted, motionless, frozen at 9:37 p.m. Melissa Witt had finally been found. Reynolds felt a wave of relief and sorrow crash over him. For the first time in months, the ghost that had followed him seemed to whisper, "Thank you." But as the evidence was processed, something unsettling emerged. The gravesite was less than a mile from Patricia Lorne's cabin. She was brought in again for questioning. Her calm composure had vanished. "I told you I didn't kill her," she cried, eyes bloodshot. But when asked why Melissa's DNA and watch were found so close to her home, her silence was deafening. Reynolds studied Patricia across the table. "You knew Gary, didn't you?" he asked. Her lips trembled. "We met at one of the shelters," she finally whispered. "He was supposed to help me find girls who needed guidance. Melissa was one of them. She trusted me." Patricia broke down, describing how Melissa had confided in her, that Gary had made unwanted advances. Melissa threatened to go to the police. Patricia, still haunted by her sister's unsolved murder years earlier, begged her to stay quiet, to let her handle it. But that night, when Melissa didn't show up to their meeting spot, Patricia panicked. "I thought Gary took her," she sobbed, "so I followed him. But he wasn't the one who buried her." "I swear," Reynolds pressed further. "Then who did?" Patricia hesitated. Her next words made the room go silent. "Gary had a brother," she said softly. "No one ever mentioned him because he left town years ago. But he came back last winter. He hated Melissa, said she was ruining everything. His name was Joel Tinsley." Joel had worked under a fake ID at a construction site near where Melissa disappeared. Records showed he had returned to Fort Smith around the same week she went missing. When police raided his abandoned trailer, they found newspaper clippings about Melissa's case and photographs uncandid, some taken from a distance. On the back of one photo, scrawled in ink, were the words, "She smiled even when she was scared." Joel was finally tracked to a small town outside Oklahoma. When SWAT entered his hideout, he was gone, but a journal lay open on the table. In it, Joel wrote about saving girls who reminded him of his sister, claiming they needed to be quiet forever. The entries became increasingly deranged near the end, and one page described the night Melissa died. "She wouldn't stop crying. I told her I just wanted her to understand. I didn't mean to hurt her. When she fell, everything went quiet. The watch broke. I left it because it was already stopped. 9:37. She looked peaceful after that. Those words sealed the case. Joel Tinsley was named the prime suspect in the murder of Melissa Witt and at least 2 other women across Arkansas. But before authorities could arrest him, he vanished completely. Melissa's mother, Mary Witt, stood at the press conference, holding her daughter's recovered watch. "This doesn't bring her back," she said, voice trembling. "But maybe now she can rest. And maybe someone out there will remember her not as a victim, but as a daughter who mattered." The town of Fort Smith finally held its memorial for Melissa that summer. Hundreds gathered, releasing lanterns into the sky as the sun dipped below the trees. Each light floated upward, reflecting on the lake where her story had begun. Detective Reynolds watched quietly from a distance. When the crowd dispersed, he stayed behind, staring at the water. The air was still, but somewhere far off, thunder rolled. He thought about all the unanswered questions, the letters, the photos, the woman in the woods that night. Had Patricia really told him everything, or had she buried more than just guilt? Later, back at his office, Reynolds received one final envelope in the mail. No return address. Inside was Melissa's high school photo, and beneath it, a note written in familiar handwriting. "You found her body, but not her truth." There was also something else inside a Polaroid of the lakeshore. In the background, faint but unmistakable, a woman stood watching the camera, her face blurred by distance, but her posture eerily familiar. Reynolds leaned closer, his pulse quickening. The photograph was dated 2 weeks ago. He picked up the phone and called dispatch. "This is Detective Reynolds. I'm heading back to Lake Fort Smith. Keep the line open." He grabbed his coat, stepped out into the night, and drove through the rain-slicked streets. The road twisted upward toward the lake, the world around him swallowed by darkness. The headlights cut through the mist, illuminating the water's surface. There was no one there, no movement, only silence. Reynolds stepped out, the ground soft beneath his boots. He reached the exact spot where the Polaroid had been taken and found something glinting under the dirt. A second watch. Old, cracked, but still ticking. The hands moved slowly, steady, alive. Reynolds froze, staring at it. The time read 9:37 p.m. He whispered, almost to himself, "How is that possible?" The forest rustled behind him. He turned, but saw nothing. The wind carried a faint whisper, or maybe it was just the leaves. As he stood there in the half-light, he realized that some stories don't end with justice or truth. Some stay with you, ticking quietly in the dark, reminding you that evil doesn't die, it just waits for the next hand to stop. The screen fades to black, and somewhere in the darkness, a watch keeps ticking. It began on a quiet October night in Tucson, Arizona. The air was dry, the streetlights humming faintly against the endless desert darkness. 18-year-old Deanna Criswell clocked out of her shift at a local diner just after 11:15 p.m., her eyes heavy but her spirit bright. She had dreams of becoming a photographer, of one day leaving behind the small, sun-baked town where everyone knew her name. But on that night, under a sky without stars, Deanna took a shortcut home, and she was never seen alive again. The next morning, her co-worker Maria noticed her absence immediately. Deanna had never missed a shift, never failed to text her mother good night. By the time her parents realized she hadn't come home, the desert sun was already high, scorching the empty highways that stretched toward nowhere. Her phone went straight to voicemail. Her purse and camera were gone, but her car was still parked outside the diner. Detectives would later describe the scene as eerily ordinary. There were no signs of a struggle, no broken glass, no footprints in the dirt, just silence. But silence can hide everything. In the days that followed, volunteers scoured the surrounding neighborhoods. Flyers with Deanna's smiling face appeared on telephone poles and diner windows. The town felt smaller, tighter, like it was holding its breath. Police interviewed everyone who had seen her last: the waitress who closed with her, the customer who left just before she did, the cab driver who swore he saw a girl matching her description walking near an old gas station on Route 86. Her boyfriend, Jake Turner, was questioned multiple times. He was soft-spoken, nervous, and evasive. They'd argued the night she disappeared, something about her wanting to move to Phoenix for school. But Jake insisted he had nothing to do with it. She said she needed space. He told police, "I didn't think she meant forever." For 2 weeks the case went cold. Leads dried up. The search parties dwindled. And then, on a windswept stretch of desert 40 miles north of Tucson, a hiker made a grim discovery on abandoned camera half buried in the sand. Its strap was tangled in a bush, worn from the wind. Inside was a roll of undeveloped film. When the photographs were processed, detectives were stunned. The images showed Deanna standing in front of a desolate gas station, one that had been shut down for decades. The last photo, taken in near darkness, captured a blurry silhouette behind her, a man, tall, wearing what appeared to be a flannel jacket. And then the frame went black. Investigators combed through old records, trying to identify the man. The gas station, long abandoned, sat on a lonely stretch of road once used by long-haul truckers and drifters. Locals said strange things happened out there, lights flickering in the distance, the echo of engines when no one was around. But now, it seemed those ghost stories had bled into reality. When detectives searched the area, they found a small silver pendant buried near where the camera was discovered. It was engraved with the initials DC. Her parents confirmed it was Deanna's. Forensic teams swept the site, gathering soil samples, tire tracks, and a single cigarette butt. The DNA results wouldn't come back for months, but when they did, the match would send shockwaves through Arizona law enforcement. Before that revelation, the investigation seemed directionless. Reporters began to circle the case, labeling it the vanishing of Deanna Criswell. The community was haunted by the image of that shadow behind her. Who was he, and why had she gone there? Jake Turner maintained his innocence, but whispers grew. People said he'd become possessive, jealous of Deanna's new ambitions. Her friends described him as controlling, saying he didn't like when she talked about moving away. But there was something else, something none of them had mentioned before. In the weeks before she vanished, Deanna had started receiving anonymous notes left on her car windshield. They were short, cryptic messages written in red ink. "Don't walk alone. The desert remembers. See you soon." Police dismissed them at first as harmless pranks, but as more surfaced, they took on a new meaning. Someone had been watching her. Someone who knew her routine, her route home, her fear. Then came a strange twist. A security camera from a gas station 20 miles south of where she worked captured footage of a woman who looked just like Deanna walking along the roadside, alone, around midnight. She appeared dazed, looking over her shoulder, clutching her jacket. But when investigators enhanced the footage, her expression froze them. She wasn't just scared, she looked like she recognized someone. And then she mouthed a single word: "Please." It would take another 3 days for detectives to identify the man whose shadow loomed behind her in that final photo. His name was Richard Galloway, a drifter, with a record stretching across 3 states: assault, burglary, attempted abduction. He'd been released from prison just 6 months before Deanna disappeared, and according to records, he'd been living out of an old camper not far from the same abandoned gas station. When police arrived at the site, they found the camper gutted, filled with empty bottles, old maps, and photographs taped to the walls. Some of them were of Deanna, others of women no one could identify. Inside a rusted toolbox, they found Deanna's camera lens and a single Polaroid picture, the same gas station. But this time, no one was in the frame, just the long road stretching into darkness. No Deanna, no shadow, only emptiness. The photo was dated 2 days after she disappeared. The discovery triggered a statewide manhunt. Roadblocks were set up. Patrols searched abandoned lots and motels. But Galloway had vanished. Detectives believed he'd fled south, possibly toward Mexico. Weeks passed with no sign of him, until Christmas Eve. A local farmer in Pinell County called 911 to report a strange smell near an irrigation ditch. When police arrived, they uncovered shallow human remains, wrapped in a torn flannel jacket. The desert wind had erased much of the evidence, but one thing remained: a silver bracelet, bent and tarnished, engraved with the word dream. It was Deanna's favorite piece. Her mother had given it to her when she turned 16. The identification came swiftly. The remains were Deanna's. Her family was shattered, the town left hollow by grief. But one question burned through every headline, every late-night conversation. If Deanna died that night, who took the Polaroid 2 days later? That question would open the darkest chapter of all. As detectives reopened old missing persons files, they found unsettling similarities. Other young women who had disappeared between Tucson and Phoenix over the past 5 years. All had been last seen near truck stops or small desert highways. and every one of them had received strange, anonymous warnings before they vanished. The same handwriting, the same red ink. FBI profiler James Klein was brought in to connect the dots. His theory was chilling. Galloway wasn't working alone. He believed Deanna's killer was part of a small, organized networkman who used CB radios and trucking routes to stalk isolated women across the Southwest. The group had been rumored among law enforcement for years, but never proven, until Deanna's case gave them the first real lead. Investigators traced the film stock from Deanna's camera to a small photography store in Tucson. The receipt revealed she'd purchased it just 3 days before her disappearance, and the clerk remembered she wasn't alone. A man with a scar along his neck had been with her, not Galloway, someone else. That new lead reignited the case, but it also led detectives into a web of deception deeper than anyone expected. A motel clerk came forward claiming he'd seen Galloway with 2 other men shortly before Christmas. They'd been loading equipment into a van, talking in low voices. When shown photographs of Deanna, the clerk hesitated. Then he said something that made everyone in the room go cold. She was there, but she wasn't moving. The horror deepened when forensic teams recovered fingerprints from the inside of that abandoned camper, prints belonging not just to Galloway, but to a man named Carl Danner, a convicted murderer out on parole, known to travel with truckers through the desert routes. But before police could locate him, he vanished too. It was as if the desert itself had swallowed them. The deeper the investigation went, the clearer it became. Deanna's death wasn't random. It was a message, a pattern, a signal that something far bigger was hidden beneath the surface of the Arizona desert. And before the truth could be uncovered, another girl went missing under eerily similar circumstances. Her name was Lacey Hill, 19 years old, vanished on her way home from a night shift, just like Deanna. The next night, I hesitated before stepping back into the Wilsons' home. The faint scent of vanilla candles greeted me at the door, just like before. But tonight, the warmth of the house felt artificial, like someone had turned up the heat to cover a deeper chill. The same family photos lined the hallway, except one was missing. The photo that had shown Mr. Wilson, Mrs. Wilson, and baby Lily at a beach was gone. A small rectangle of lighter paint revealed its absence. Maybe they just moved it, I whispered, locking the door behind me. As I walked toward the living room, something faint caught my attention, a soft hum. It wasn't from the refrigerator this time. It was coming from the baby monitor. I leaned closer. A voice was whispering lullabies, slow, deliberate, and wrong. It wasn't Mrs. Wilson's voice. My body tensed. The melody grew clearer, weaving through the static. "Go to sleep, little one. Go to sleep before the sun." The monitor crackled, then silence. "Okay, probably a radio signal," I muttered to myself, trying to convince my trembling hands to calm down. I decided to check on Lily. Her room was upstairs, softly lit by the night lamp, shaped like a star. She was fast asleep, her tiny chest rising and falling peacefully. The baby monitor camera blinked red in the corner. I looked at it and froze. It was facing the wrong way, not toward the crib, but toward the window. I slowly turned it back. The lens squeaked faintly, and as I adjusted it, something outside the window caught my eye. A figure, standing motionless across the street. No light, no detail, just the silhouette of someone tall, watching. I stepped back instinctively, heart racing. I blinked, and the figure was gone. When I looked at Lily again, she was awake. Her tiny eyes were open, and she was staring directly at the window. I whispered her name softly, "Lily." She didn't blink. Her lips trembled, and she whispered something so faint I almost didn't hear it. "Don't let her in." I felt my blood run cold. "Who?" "Lily," I whispered. She looked at me, really looked at me, with a fear no child should ever know. "The lady in the mirror." Before I could respond, the lights flickered and went out. The only illumination was the dim, flickering nightlight and the faint red glow of the baby monitor camera. From downstairs, I heard the sound of something falling, like glass shattering. I picked up Lily and backed away slowly. "It's okay, sweetheart. I'm here," I whispered, though my voice betrayed my terror. As I reached the doorway, I heard it again, the humming. But now it was closer, coming from down the hall. Each note was sharp, deliberate, echoing through the dark. I turned my phone flashlight on and stepped out carefully. The hallway looked longer than before, stretched and warped by shadows. Every family photo seemed to have changed, the faces slightly off, eyes looking elsewhere, smiles frozen wrong. Halfway down, I noticed something new, a door that hadn't been there last night. It was slightly ajar, revealing only darkness beyond. I should have gone back. I should have called the police, or left Lily with the neighbors. But curiosity, or maybe fear of the unknown, pulled me closer. The air around the door was cold, not normal cold. It bit into my skin. My breath fogged, as if I had stepped into winter. Inside was a narrow staircase leading downward. The Wilsons didn't have a basement. At least I didn't think they did. I whispered, "Hello." Not answered, just the faint sound of a woman crying below. I swallowed hard. The crying turned into quiet laughter, soft, broken, echoing through the unseen space. "Lily," I whispered, but she had fallen asleep against my shoulder, completely still. I stepped onto the first stair. It creaked loudly, echoing unnaturally long. Then another. The crying grew louder, more human. At the bottom, the flashlight revealed old furniture, covered in sheets, dust thick on every surface. A rocking chair stood in the center, gently moving back and forth. But nobody was there. The crying had stopped. Then, behind me, a woman's whisper, "Why are you in my house?" I spun around. Nothing. Then my flashlight flickered, and in that instant of light and shadow, I saw her. A woman in a long white nightgown, her hair dripping wet, as if she'd just stepped out of water. Her eyes were black hollows. Her skin was pale, grayish, like something that hadn't seen sunlight in years. "I live here," she said, smiling faintly, "and you shouldn't have turned the camera." I couldn't breathe. She stepped closer, her bare feet leaving wet prints on the dusty floor. The smell of decay hit me, something between mold and death. I stumbled back, clutching Lily tightly. The flashlight slipped from my hand, rolling across the floor and stopping at her feet. In that narrow beam of light, I saw something impossible. Her reflection appeared behind me in a cracked mirror, leaning against the wall. But in the reflection, she was holding Lily. I screamed and bolted upstairs, nearly tripping over my own feet. The door slammed shut behind me with a thunderous bang. When I looked down at Lily, she was awake again, but calm, as if nothing had happened. She smiled faintly and whispered, "She's mad now." That was the last straw. I ran to the front door, unlocked it, and burst outside into the cool night air. I didn't stop running until I reached the streetlight at the corner. When I turned back, the house looked normal. Lights on, calm, silent. Mrs. Wilson's car was pulling into the driveway. She looked surprised to see me. "Megan, why are you outside? Is Lily okay?" I tried to explain, stammering, "There's someone in your house. A woman in the basement." Mrs. Wilson's face went pale. "Basement? We don't have a basement." I froze. She rushed inside, calling for Lily. I followed hesitantly. Everything looked perfect again. The photos were back to normal. Even the missing picture had returned to the wall. Lily sat in her crib, fast asleep, peaceful, innocent. Mrs. Wilson turned to me. "You must have imagined it. Maybe stress. Night terrors are common here. This house has strange acoustics." But as she spoke, my eyes wandered to the mirror across the room, the one that faced the crib. For a split second, I saw it again. The woman's face, smiling behind Lily, and then it was gone. Over the next few days, I tried to convince myself it was a hallucination. Sleep deprivation, anxiety, anything but what I'd seen. Then the Wilsons called again. "We need you this weekend. Lily's been asking for you. She keeps saying your name at night." I almost said no. I should have said no. But something about the tone in Mrs. Wilson's voice, desperate, tired, made me agree. Saturday night, I went back. This time, the house was darker. Even the warm lights couldn't hide the heavy stillness in the air. Mrs. Wilson handed me Lily and left quickly, saying they'd be back before midnight. The moment the door closed, Lily whispered, "She missed you." I tried to smile. "Who did, sweetie?" "The lady. She said you broke her mirror." My heart stopped. Before I could respond, I heard the same lullaby again, faint, floating from the baby monitor. I picked it up slowly. The screen flickered, showing the nursery. Only there were two Lilies, one sleeping peacefully in the crib, the other standing beside the crib, smiling directly at the camera, and behind her, the woman in white. I dropped the monitor. It hit the floor, static filling the air. Lily began crying. Every light in the house flickered violently. The walls seemed to groan. The humming became deafening. I grabbed Lily and ran for the front door, but it wouldn't open. The handle twisted, but something was holding it shut from the other side. Through the frosted glass, I saw a shadow. a tall, slender silhouette pressing its hand against the door. "Stay with me," the voice whispered, not from outside, but from inside my head. My vision blurred. I felt dizzy, weak. The walls pulsed, breathing. Then, in one final surge of will, I screamed and yanked the door open. I stumbled onto the porch, gasping for air, clutching Lily tight. When I turned back, the house lights all went out at once, and in the darkness of the doorway, she stood there, smiling, then gone. I never babysat again. The Wilsons moved out a month later. The house sits empty now, windows boarded up, but sometimes, when I drive past at night, I still hear faint humming from inside. And if you ever see that house on Maple Street, the one with the cracked window and the faint light that flickers at midnight, do yourself a favor. Don't look in the mirror. I thought it was over. Months had passed since that night. I'd moved to another town, got a new job, and tried to forget everything about Maple Street, the humming, the woman, the mirror. But some things don't let you forget. Every night around midnight, I'd wake up to faint static from my phone. Even when it was powered off, I could hear it, the same lullaby leaking through the speaker. "Go to sleep, little one." At first, I convinced myself it was in my head. PTSD, maybe. But then the calls started. Unknown number, always at 12:03 a.m. When I answered, there was only the sound of breathing. Sometimes, I swore I heard a baby giggle faintly in the background. I changed my number. The calls stopped for a while. Then, one evening, I received an envelope in my mailbox. No return address. Inside was a single photograph, me holding Lily in the Wilsons' living room. The thing was, no one had ever taken that picture. In the background, behind me, reflected faintly in the window, was her, the woman in white. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat up on my couch, clutching the photo, and I noticed something written on the back in shaky handwriting. "She's still waiting in the mirror." 2 days later, I couldn't take it anymore. I had to know. I had to see if the house was still there, if maybe someone else had moved in, if I'd imagined it all. When I drove back to Maple Street, it was dusk. The house looked abandoned. Boards covered the windows. The lawn was overgrown, but someone had placed a candle in the upstairs window, flickering, waiting. I parked across the street and stared for a long time. Every instinct told me to leave, but that old gnawing curiosity wouldn't die. I crossed the yard, the grass brushing against my legs like reaching fingers. The front door was unlocked. Inside, the air was thick and heavy, full of mold and silence. The faint scent of vanilla candles still lingered, though the candles themselves were burned to stubs. The baby monitor sat on the dusty coffee table, exactly where I dropped it that night. It flickered faintly, even though it wasn't plugged in. Static, then humming. My pulse quickened. I followed the sound upstairs. The nursery door was open. Everything was still there. The crib, the star-shaped nightlight, the rocking chair. Dust coated everything, but it was all perfectly arranged, as if someone had just stepped out moments ago. And then I saw the mirror. It leaned against the far wall, cracked but intact, covered in dust, except for a single perfect handprint on the glass. "Hello," my voice trembled. "Who are you?" The reflection shifted. At first, it was my own face. Then, slowly, it wasn't. The figure in the mirror smiled faintly, my smile, but twisted. Then her voice came, layered over mine. She wanted me to watch her baby. My throat went dry. Who did? The reflection blinked, but I didn't. She said she'd be back before midnight. The voice continued. She never came back. The light flickered. The room grew colder. Images began to flash across the mirror like a movie reel. A family moving in, a baby crying, a mother leaving for work, promising she'd return soon. Then an accident, a car crash, a woman's body floating in dark water, pale and lifeless. And then her spirit, standing over a crib, whispering lullabies through the baby monitor. She wasn't evil. She was trapped. She never meant to hurt anyone. The voice whispered, softer now. But when they covered the mirror, she couldn't see her baby anymore. My heart ached, but also froze with dread, because in the reflection, behind the woman, I could see me holding Lily, except I wasn't holding anyone. I turned around, and the crib was empty. The reflection smiled wider. "Now you understand." The glass began to tremble, cracking like ice. I stumbled back, but the reflection reached out, her pale hand pressing against the inside of the mirror. The glass rippled like water, and then, a voice behind me, "Megan." I turned slowly. Lily stood in the doorway, a few years older now, maybe 4 or 5, wearing the same little blue dress she used to wear. But that wasn't possible. "Lily," I whispered. She smiled faintly. "She says you can help her come back." Before I could react, she walked up to the mirror and placed her hand against the same spot as the ghost's. The glass shimmered, and then, with a low, groaning sound, the reflection stepped out. The woman was real, solid. She looked at me with hollow eyes and whispered, "Thank you." Then, before I could move, she turned to Lily, and they both vanished. The room went still. The mirror was empty again. I screamed her name, tearing the sheets off the crib, searching every corner. Nothing. No Lily, no woman. Just silence. Days later, the police searched the house. They found no evidence of anyone. No bodies, no footprints, nothing. The mirror was gone. I tried to tell them everything. They wrote it off as trauma or hallucination. But the story didn't end there. A month later, I received another envelope in the mail. Inside was a new photo. Lily, smiling, standing by a lake. Behind her, the woman, no longer pale, no longer hollow-eyed, holding her hand. They both looked peaceful. At the bottom of the photo, written in that same shaky handwriting, were the words, "She's with her mother now." For the first time, I didn't feel fear, just a quiet sadness. Maybe she hadn't been haunting me. Maybe she just wanted to find her child. I thought that was the end. Until last week, I moved into a small apartment, trying to start fresh. I bought new furniture, even a small vanity mirror for my bedroom. That night, as I brushed my hair, I noticed something strange. A faint handprint, small, childlike, appeared on the mirror's surface. Then, softly, from somewhere deep inside the glass, I heard it, "Go to sleep, little one," and a soft giggle followed. I dropped the brush. When I looked back, my reflection was smiling, but I wasn't, and in the corner of the mirror, barely visible, stood Lily, still holding her mother's hand. They waved once, then disappeared into the silver. The handprint stayed, forever.